Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Trustee Dan McLean, Chair of the Finance, Budget, and Enrollment Committee. Today is Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome committee members, trustees, staff, and members of the public. I would also ask everyone who's able to please rise at this time. We acknowledge that we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas, of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Miigwech. Thank you. The next item up is the approval of the agenda. I need a mover and seconder for the agenda. Trustee Hassan will move. Trustee Rajwani will second. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's approved. Trustees have had an opportunity to review the agenda and the recommendations. Are there any declarations of possible conflicts of interest? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move forward. Number 4 is delegations. Again, I would like to thank staff, trustees, and the members of the public who adapted to our earlier special meeting and our this afternoon. And as such, we have no delegations at this time. So now we will go to committee advisory reports. We are going to do our committee advisory reports, and then we're going to break into private. First up is our first report for consideration is Special Education Advisory Committee report from their meeting on May 12th, 2025 regarding no cuts to supports and services for students with disabilities and special education needs. This is on page 1 of the agenda. This time I invite co-chair of SEAC, David Lepofsky, to present this. Mr. Lepofsky, I invite you to press *6 and become unmuted, sir.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
We can. Please.
And can you see me? I don't know if my camera's on or off at this point.
It is.
Oh, good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Let me dig in. I'm going to be fast. Just let me get to my... so why am I here? You folks are tasked with the extraordinarily challenging job of trying to sort out the budget and eliminate the deficit. And we don't for a moment underestimate both the enormity and the difficulty of that task. Our request is a simple one, and I'm hoping an uncontroversial one, which is simply that there be no cuts to programs, services, or supports for students with disabilities or special education needs. Now, I'm going to narrow this and go very fast. We, as some of you will know, held a parents' town hall last fall. The Special Education Advisory Committee did, and we heard from quite a number of parents of students with disabilities and special education needs, and their stories were harrowing about the challenges they are facing at school. That doesn't mean that's the case for all students, but it is the case for, we believe, too many students with special education needs. And we're working with staff we've been advancing recommendations to staff on various measures that can be done to try to address this. One of the common themes was that, if anything, special education is under-resourced. And we know from presentations by Craig Snyder that the board allocates more to it than is funded by the province, and that is, of course, appreciated, but that is the backdrop to this. Now, on the one hand, we've had a very clear statement to us by the Associate Director, Louise Tarisco, that there will be no cuts to special education staffing other than those which are triggered by or commensurate with enrollment reductions. Now, today we heard further that there are, in fact, no cuts to special education staff at all. And these are very reassuring statements for us. But we have to look at them, and we don't for a moment question the sincerity or accuracy of those who are telling us this. We do, however, face a couple of dilemmas, as do you. The first is that we have been told just at our May Special Education Advisory Committee meeting that TDSB staff have a plan to raise the ceilings on the number of students to be permitted or the caps in certain special education classes, also called intensive sport programs or ISPs. And we are told that this fits within provincial guidelines. That is to say, they're not raising them above provincial guidelines, but that in fact the TDSB's caps up till now have been lower than the guidelines from or requirements from the province. And in the case of one particular category, diagnostic kindergarten, there are no provincial guidelines because it's a creation of TDSB, not one of the province. The challenge that this confronts for parents of students with disabilities and special education needs is it appears to be inconsistent with a commitment that there is no reduction in special education staffing support. And we're not for a moment suggesting anybody's being disingenuous. We're just looking at these two things which appear to be contradictory and want to make sure that the assurance we've gotten is categorical and ironclad. Now, one of the possibilities we understand, or the possibility we understand, is that there's going to be some staff reallocation within the board among the special education staff of which students they support. And we understand that that's within the bandwidth of what the staff may do and so on. But we want to just make sure that whatever is done does not involve, as a matter of policy, any reduction of service supports or programs for students with disabilities or special education needs, whether they're in an integrated support, intensive support class or in a mainstream class. In other words, however the deck is shuffled, we don't want any students to be worse off in terms of support next year than they are this year. Now, so that's what we want to make sure of. Moreover, we've gotten feedback from parents in two different contexts. One conveyed directly to me by a couple of parent councils, and one conveyed to our entire membership of our special education committee at last month at our special education advisory committee meeting. The one conveyed to all of us, and was a delegation of parents from children from one particular congregated school, expressing a concern that the province allows for lower class sizes for classes with children with multiple disabilities and complex needs, and that this is not something the board is doing. I can't speak to those facts. I can say they reported that to us. I can tell you that we've also asked TDSB staff to brief us on this, which I understand will be doing at our Special Education Advisory Committee next Monday evening. But because you're dealing with this before we get a chance to speak to them, the staff, about it, we just want to put that on on your plates because of the fact that children have needs which are more than can be handled now in some cases. This was a particular concern raised with us. We want to make sure that nothing in the budget certainly makes that worse. And if anything, we'd love to see if things can be improved. The other thing is, there are two congregated schools I know of, because the parent council presidents have contacted me, in which there was in both schools a full-time vice principal. And next year they've been advised there will be one vice principal between the two of them. And there are concerns that this is not just an administrative role. It's not just some vice principal who's doing administrative tasks, that they have direct involvement with parents. They deal with complicated situations. The students in the schools have particularly complicated situations. One of those schools is actually getting more students because they're getting a new program next year added. And so we want to make sure that, again, the commitment to us doesn't have any loopholes. Now, in saying this, I emphasize that there is no suggestion of that staff aren't being straight up with us. The concern, however, is that the information we have looks to some like it's hard to square it all. And we want to make sure it does get squared. And we believe that you as trustees need to know this before you vote on a budget. Just two other things. And they're both very important. One is this. There are within the Toronto District School Board a population of students whose disabilities are recognized as falling within the definition of, I hate this word, exceptionality within the special education legislation, and therefore are entitled to special education services. And as such, whatever staff there is and budget there is and program is available for them. However, through no fault of yours, TDSB staff, or anything at the board level, the fact is that the definition of exceptionality that the province uses does not include all disabilities. There are students with disabilities who are not covered by the definition that qualifies them for special education services, and yet they have the right to equal education without discrimination because of disability and to be accommodated under the Human Rights Code, which prevails over the special education law. Now, you can't fix that here. The board has a duty to serve all these kids. I, at our last month's 2 months ago at our Special Education Advisory Committee meeting, asked Craig Snyder, who was briefing us on the budget, is there a line item in the budget for covering the costs of accommodating the disability-related needs of students with disabilities at the board whose disability is not qualifying them for special education, doesn't fall within the definition that the ministry uses for special education? And his answer was no, there is no such line item. Now, what that means is we may get an assurance of no cuts to special education, but this particular group of students could face cuts that could affect them because they're not within that envelope. And we want to ask you to make sure that your budget does not involve any cuts to services, supports, or programs for any student with disability or special education need, period. And there's a hole in the budget planning that doesn't assure this. And so I wanted to place that before you. Finally, and subject to any questions you have, I'm done. The board did a survey of parents a couple of months ago saying essentially we've got a deficit. I am paraphrasing potentially unfairly in my characterization, and if staff correct me, I defer to their characterization. I don't want to be unfair. But essentially was saying, look, the trustees have to deal with a deficit and where to cut. Here are areas, what are your views? And they named several. One of them was special education. It should not have been in that survey. The effect, number one, the duty to accommodate students with disabilities and to serve those students is part of the Human Rights Code Ontario's education legislation. It's not an option. And the second thing is, the effect of that message was to cause any number of parents of these students to be very upset and feel quite vulnerable that their children may be facing cuts when they've been battling in any number of cases to get what they do get. And third, there is a concern that this could actually lead parents of students without disabilities in some cases to sort of see it as, well, if they close the pools, it's because they're putting too much money into that special education thing. They spend enough on that, why don't they just keep the pools open or something like that? And that kind of backlash we wouldn't tolerate in the case of, and we certainly wouldn't want the board creating for students of any vulnerable identity. It's certainly not fair to do that with respect to students with disabilities or special education needs. There's no suggestion that this was intentional. However, as is well settled in human rights law, the intent does not matter. It's the effect. And the effect of including this in the survey was foreseeable, was obvious, was troubling, and was wrong. We've asked for an apology. Again, to the credit of staff, Louise Sorisco did articulate an apology to us. We appreciate that. And it is genuine and sincere, heartfelt. But we wanted to bring this to you because we think for the 40,000 students with disabilities and special education needs or more at the board, this should come from the board. So, subject to any questions you have, we have two asks. The primary one, the substantive one, is that there be an assurance in the budget that there will be no cuts to programs, services, or supports for students with any disabilities or special education needs. And second, addressing this problem of this survey and hoping that that will never, ever happen again. Subject to any questions you have, I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Mr. Lepofsky. Thank you for your ongoing work with the committee and for you making the time today. Before we go to questions, I just would like trustees who've joined the meeting to share, trustee in the room are Trustee DeVitas, Trustee Hassan, Trustee Rejwani, Trustee Klein, and myself. Can the trustees online please identify themselves for the record?
Trustee Laskin.
Trustee Williams here.
Trustee Dawson.
Trustee Patel.
Trustee King.
Trustee Roger Closingham.
Okay, thank you, trustees. Now we will we'll concentrate our questions on the presentation made on from Mr. Lepofsky. I have Trustee Dawson. You'll go first.
Thank you through the chair. So for what it's worth, I personally would like to apologize for the inclusion of spec ed in the survey. We did vote at a later time to shut down the survey, but I recognize that was after harm had already been done. So, you know, this isn't an official board response, but I personally do feel the need to apologize for that having been included in the survey. At this point, Chair, would it be acceptable to ask questions of staff about this report, or should I come back on the list when questions are directed to staff?
Yeah, initially we're going to have questions with regards to the report as it's tabled and the presentation made by Co-Chair Lepofsky. And then when the matters are to be considered, we will then open it up to questions of staff.
So I have questions of staff on this report. So don't ask them until later.
That's correct.
Okay, if you could put me back on the list for that later time then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Hassan.
Hi, David. Thank you for your delegation or your report that you brought forward today. This is Trustee Hassan here, also a member of SEAC. So I want to ditto Trustee Dawson's sentiment in that we do apologize for the inclusion of special education in the survey. And I'm wondering if you can highlight to us tonight right now why it's important that the TDSB does deliver a public apology.
I think it's important for multiple reasons. And by the way, I want to just correct something in the report I submitted. There may be, and I just didn't proofread right before we came in, but there may be a reference to being unclear whether the commitment we've received related to enrollment, no reductions relative to enrollment of special ed students or all students, through information that staff have helpfully provided since, that's no longer an issue, and I appreciate staff doing that. Why it matters is twofold. Number one, if you look at the video of our SEAC meetings, while I think that the meetings that we have are absolutely spellbinding and scintillating, the fact is about 100 people watched the video. There are 40,000 students with disabilities or special education needs. Their parents won't know what was said there. But their parents did receive that survey. So that's the first reason. And the second reason is this. That survey didn't go out unless somebody approved it. And I don't know who, and I'm not asking. But there needs to be a clear message to staff, like that this should not happen again. And an apology to us, heartfelt, sincere, genuine, and I might add, very much appreciated. And because I happen to be friends with Louise, I can also say it's exactly the way she is. I know her, and she meant it. But that's one senior staffer to a couple dozen people in the room with several staff there and 100 people watching online. The message needs to be conveyed in a way so that staff who next time are working on devising this or God knows what else, think twice and are much more alive to the incidental harm their conduct can cause, even if not intended, and of course they didn't intend it.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Trustee Hassan. Trustee Laskin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I'm not there and I apologize. I'm not sure if the director is in the room, but I am wondering if the director needs a motion from the committee to issue the public apology, or if he is, in terms of a formal apology, that always tends to come, I believe, through motion from the board. So I'm just not sure procedurally how to make that happen. I'm not a member of the committee, but I don't know if since Associate Director Cirisco did apologize, but that's not public, that's not minuted anywhere. So I seek your advice, Mr. Chair, on how to make this happen now. Obviously it needs to move to board, but I just seek your advice on how to do this in a way that is clear, because it needs to be in the minutes, in the formal minutes of the board to make this happen. So I'm seeking your advice, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. The director has not made the chair aware of any. The director has the ability to make an apology on any number of places, and if and when he chooses to do so, that will be up to him to decide. We'll deal with the motions as they're from committee once trustees have concluded their questions. and then they'll be on the floor. But until then, we can't, these questions are to be designed for the Mr. Lepovsky and not for staff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. And seeing no other further questions, we thank you, Mr. Lepovsky, for your delegation and your ongoing work on behalf of the committee.
Thanks so much, and wishing you the best for the rest of your meeting. Take care.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. I just skipped over Trustee Klein. Sorry, David, can you hold on just a second?
I absolutely sure can.
Trustee Klein, I apologize.
Oh, no worries. Thank you through the chair. Hi, David. It's so good to see you again.
Likewise.
Just a question. So you, for clarification, you talked about the term exceptionalities doesn't cover all disabilities. Of course, these students have the right to be accommodated as well. Just wondering if you can just expand on what that means and what does that look like to those who aren't specialists in
Sure,
understanding
absolutely.
disabilities.
Let me give you two examples that we know about. One is ADHD. I'm not saying for a moment the board isn't trying to accommodate students with ADHD. Don't get me wrong, and I know that the Louise and her team are doing efforts on this. But the fact is that ADHD is a disability. It is not covered, and with the in the term exceptionality, and parents and organizations advocating for these students have been raising this provincially. They raised it with the Kindergarten to Grade 12 Standards Development Committee, of which I was a member, provincially appointed. We recommended that this needs to be fixed. The provincial government hasn't. But we still get feedback, and in fact, memory serves, it was one parent at our town hall who talked about asking for an IEP for their child at a TDSB school and being told, oh, well, your child has ADHD, they'd need to have another condition as well that constitutes an exceptionality, which, as I understand it, is just plain failure to understand the overriding human rights obligations. Now, we're having conversations with staff about what they can do about it, but at the very least, you need to understand that is what you end up with is teachers and professional staff who've gone through a whole education training working in the school board system. We've been pushing this issue at SEAC for any number of months and years, and we're not alone, and we're not the initiator of the concern. Another example that's quite shocking is mental health conditions. As I understand it, behavior can constantly be identified as an exceptionality. But if you have a mental health condition that doesn't rise to the condition of being a behavior issue, you are not within the special education program. And of course, there are mental health programs and so on, and we all want kids with mental health issues to be served. But this is the bureaucratic and legal framework that you folks are and TDSB staff are handcuffed by, and so on. On the one hand, the Human Rights Code says one thing, on the other hand, people are raised just in the Education Act, they know that, so you'll hear all sorts of talk day after day about, well, exceptionality, does the child have an exceptionality? What exceptionality they have? That by definition is freezing out some kids who are legally entitled under the Human Rights Code to be accommodated and to a full equal education. And this can get in the way, but in the case of the budget, what this means is the rest of the budget is designed to address the education needs of students. Assuming they have no disability, the special education budget is designed to accommodate the needs of students who have an exceptionality. And then we've got this gap in between of the kids who have disabilities, but they're not exceptionalities. And on that, there is no budget line item to fund the meeting of their needs, meaning schools, teachers, and so on just have to make do with whatever they can but they're funded as if they don't have disabilities. Do you follow me? So that's the context in which this happens.
Trustee Klein?
That's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the clarity.
Okay, and with that, I have no further trustees on the line or in the room.
Trustee Williams, I have a question through you, Mr.
Trustee
Chair.
Williams, please proceed.
Thank you. And thank you again for your delivering your report, Mr. Lepowski. I just have a question. You referred to that gap, that funding gap, or that gap with regard to disabilities that are not identified as exceptionalities. Could you maybe clarify what is needed to close that gap?
Well, let's put it this way. If we were sitting here going, how do we deal with it? We want to know, what are the, something like how many students we got? What are the general spectrum of needs that come from that? What added supports do they require? And then how do we staff to provide those supports and then cost it? That's the way I would think it through. The same way you think about how many students do we have at the board, and how many classrooms do we need, and okay, and then what's the cost of doing all that kind of capital support infrastructure? Same sort of thing. And I'm not a budget guy, believe me. I have somebody do my tax returns, but we are identifying an area where there is a need. And if the need is to be met, you look and say, okay, well, what's the budget for that, meeting that need? And as far as we were told, we asked, is there a budget light item for this? And the answer is no. Now, are staff trying to meet that needs? I'm not for a moment saying, no, they don't care or something. It's just, this is the budget framework within which they operate. And as for what parents are actually experiencing on the front line, we'd need to hear from them.
Thank you. And through the chair, I guess my follow-up question, has SEAC been provided with any data with respect to the number of students that would be falling within the gap that you've identified?
I'm going to look over, I think Nandy and Louise are here. We haven't asked, in fairness, and I don't know whether and to what extent that data would even be tracked. But I can't, but certainly we haven't asked.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you again for your report.
At least within my memory. And I've been on SEAC for 10 years, but unless it came up at a meeting where I wasn't there.
Yeah, you've been there as long as I remember, to be honest, with a little time off and came back. But thanks again for your report, Mr. Lepowski, and through you, Mr. Chair, those are my questions.
Thank you, Trustee Williams. And seeing none others questions, I think this time I mean it, Mr. Lepowski.
Okay.
We thank you for your time tonight, and we thank you for sharing your perspectives.
All right, very good. Thanks so much for giving me a chance. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Since before we open it up to talk about the recommendations, when the report was tabled, a number of concerns have been brought to the chair regarding whether parts of this are in order. I want to be clear that there are no options on the table that suggest any reduction of funding to the area of special education. However, after having discussions with the governance team, with legal, creating a policy that would be live for 4 or 5 years before it would circle back, and making commitments as to not making cuts creates a scenario in which there could be dramatic reductions in the numbers theoretically. And because we said that there would be no cuts, we would have to maintain current funding levels, even though we would have theoretically far fewer students in our system. And as such, Number 1 is deemed to be out of order. Number 3, TDSB trustees have the ability to direct the director and his staff through him to do work, to create reports. And trustees, if we're so inclined, we have the ability to ask our chair to make public statements or to make statements during our board meetings when he is afforded time. But based on the recommendations I have received, that trustees cannot make this request of the director. And as such, number 3 is out of order. I will share that the budget survey happened in conjunction with the work that the budget committee does. I had access I was part of those discussions. We were debating approaches, and most of my discussions were about whether we should be talking about priorities or areas to cut. But I had access to these. I was looped in, and through an error of omission on my part, but it was clear that it was going the other way, and we were going to ask our budget questions around the focus around cuts. There was an opportunity for me to share a perspective that I didn't. In that regard, I represented the committee poorly, and those actions ultimately negatively affected those in our special education community. And for that, I'm sorry. But number 3 is something the committee does not have the authority to do. And as such, number 3 is out of order. So number 2 is what our conversation now will focus on. And Trustee Dawson was first on the list as it pertains to number 2.
Thank you, through the chair. So I'm confused about what is a cut versus an operational efficiency. And I think it's worth clarifying for the public. So we're getting a ton of emails right now about kindergarten diagnostic classes and DD classes going from a ratio of 1 teacher per 8 students to a ratio of 1 teacher per 10 students. And that to me is a spec ed cut. So that is perceived by the general public as a cut. And so I would like to understand from staff, what decision did trustees make to influence that cut? And if nothing, what is the basis for that reduction in staff or increase in staff to student ratio in those programs?
Thank you. And through the chair, staff are very pleased to be speaking about special education. Anytime we have an opportunity to be clarifying, providing reassurance in regards to the support we provide to our students with special education needs, we see it as a really very positive opportunity. So thank you for the question, Trustee Dawson. In regards to the changes to class size ratios for specific classes, we brought this intended change in our special education plan to SEAC for information, to let them know that we are changing the special education plan for efficiencies. Trustee Dawson, as you described them, staff do not see them as reductions. The information that I shared and is accurate with SEAC is we have committed the same level of staffing as we have currently in our system this year to next year's students. We are expecting a slight decline in enrollment, yet we are going to maintain that same level of staffing. But as we do every year, we look at the needs across our entire system. And we see where there are areas of greater need growing need, reduced need based on the profile of students, and we need to make decisions about where our resources go. The resources may not be the same number of educators, teachers. We may have fewer teachers, more SNAs, more EAs. And again, every single student's profile is reviewed. What we noted is that there are select class types that operate within TDSB, so diagnostic kindergarten, MID junior, as well as classes for students with learning disabilities, that our caps do not mirror that of the ministry. And we had ranges within the special education plan. So in the event where there was a range, we adopted the higher range, the higher number of the range. And for the class of diagnostic kindergarten, we did move to that higher number of 10. We are absolutely in compliance with ministry expectations. To your point, Trustee Dawson, of how trustees interact with this operational efficiency decision, we bring the plan to SEAC for information and for advice. The special education plan is coming to PSSC on Thursday, tomorrow, just tomorrow, where the changes are for the board's consideration. We then submit the special education plan to the ministry. And part of our reporting is the ministry asks us the date that the board approved the plan. But they consider the plan and then its compliance to their direction. So it's a bit gray there, I'll say. So that is the information. I hope that provides some clarity for you. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that. If we had an unlimited special education budget, would we be reducing or keeping the same that staff ratio to student, or would we still be increasing it?
Thank you. Trustee Dawson, regardless of whether we were actually increasing the investment in special education monetarily, and we had the ability to hire more educators, more SNAs, more EAs, we have a duty to be looking for efficiencies because every support matters. We would still be making these operational changes because there are students in mainstream settings where we can see that increasing a class size by 2 students is able across our system to give us more staff to be supporting students with special education needs in a mainstream setting. In addition, what we recognize is the interest from parents through our IPRC process is continuing to increase. Parents are very much wanting during an IPRC meeting to select an ISP. By increasing our class size by 2, which again is aligned to ministry expectations, we actually are giving more access to these classes across our system for more students and families. So it is absolutely an efficiency that we feel enhances access to support for children. Thanks.
Thanks. I mean, okay, I'll ask my other questions tomorrow when the actual report comes, but I just feel the need to say publicly that if we had an unlimited spec ed budget, that those classes would go from a ratio of 1 to 8 to 1-on-1, right? Like unlimited budget, I would think that we would have unlimited resources that actually, you know, to David's point, address the needs of students that maybe their designation isn't necessarily captured by what the ministry has. So that's all I'll say on that. So with respect to 3, I know we're not discussing it, but I did just want to say to the committee that perhaps they might consider some advocacy with the chair through a motion to offer an apology of the survey. And if it's appropriate, I would like to directly ask the director if that's something that is planned from staff.
It's not.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Trustee Dawson. Trustee Klein.
Thank you through the chair. I just want to pick up from where Trustee Dawson has left off. Thank you, Trustee Dawson. So you said that in terms of the numbers, the ratio for diagnostic kindergarten, we've, of course, we're saying we've moved to 10. You said that we didn't near the ministry's numbers, and this is compliance with the ministry. What is the max that the ministry, I just want some clarification. What is the max number, Claire? Just clarification on that.
Thanks for the question. So the maximum in terms of the ministry class size caps would be for a multiple exceptionality class, in which there are students who could have, you could have a student with a learning disability as well as autism, a student with only autism, a student with developmental disability, and that's a class size of 16.
Okay.
So if we were to make our diagnostic kindergarten class, which actually has students with multiple exceptionalities because they are coming in very, very little, and we don't have the information on them as yet, as they settle, as they go through schooling, and we're able to get that information, it would actually be 16 if we were going to look at that, because there are students as they come in that we don't have all the information to accurately say. At age 4 or 5 or 6, you're a student with a developmental disability or you're a student with a learning disability. So the maximum there would actually be 16.
Okay, thank you. And to follow up from that, I have heard from teachers and parents in my ward just in the last couple of days. And one of the things that they're concerned with, so I just want some clarification here, that they've said that they were IPRC'd into the diagnostic kindergarten program this year. And they were told that the cap was 8. And this is even as recent as this week. And making this change at the end of the year, they're feeling that parents and educators don't have time to prepare for more students. So I was wondering how have you communicated how they can prepare for this change?
Thank you. And that's a really good question. So the change has not been communicated because we're waiting to go to PSSC and to board to approve the amendments in special education plan. So this would be an amendment that would need to be approved as part of the larger special education plan. However, what you're saying makes perfect sense in terms of training and providing support from the special education and inclusion department, and also professional support services around mental health, social worker, all those pieces. So it would be a wraparound support, not only for the students in the class, but also the school-based and classroom-based staff. This year, outside of this, and every year we do offer job-embedded training through release time for diagnostic kindergarten teachers, where they come and actually learn together with kindergarten teachers in the regular program, and then we break off in the afternoon for just them on how to support students in a diagnostic kindergarten classroom. So we would continue that support in terms of professional learning and classroom supports in terms of C-claims, which is technology, assistive technology that can be used to support students as well. And I also want to highlight the important role that support staff plays. So in a diagnostic kindergarten classroom, as an example, when we speak about class size caps for any of our intensive support programs, it's referring to the teacher-student ratio, but we're not looking at the support staff that would be there. So each diagnostic kindergarten class would have 1 teacher and at least 1 support staff. Some could be accessing additional support staff within the school for a portion of the day or even the full day as well. So I do want to mention the support staff.
Thank you. Just to follow up there. So just to clarify that the increase to 1 to 10 may also mean potentially an increase in the support staff or technology support for those extra 2 students. It could look, it's not just adding 2 more bodies to the classroom. They're also adding the appropriate support.
So correct. And again, it may not necessarily be a human resource. It could be that, or it could be assistive technology. It could be central staff going in and modeling strategies for the teacher on how to support the student. So there are a variety of ways, but at the end of the day, it would be how do we support the classroom staff as we make that transition?
Okay, thank you. Just one more question. Can you please just describe what this assistive technology is? These are very young children. And how does this, what is the assistive technology and how does it help a human in properly helping these children, teaching these children? We're talking not about a human body, we're talking about technology. So what is it and how does it help?
Sure. So there are a variety of assistive technology tools, and that could be something as a speech device that for students who may not be communicating verbally, for example. The needs vary. It could be as well an iPad where they're touching on a screen. It could be not assistive technology, but an assistive device could be something through occupational therapy, physiotherapy, in terms of equipment within the classroom that would be supporting students as well that they may need. So we would do that anyway. It's regardless of if we were going from 8 to 10, these are all supports that would be available to any classroom that may require them.
Okay, thank you. But again, just one last thing. Just to be clear, there is no support like human support. These assistive technologies are only helpful when you have the human support with that. You're talking about, for example, the iPad, I guess, but it's really the concerns that I'm getting is that there's less human support for these children.
So there would be at least a minimum of 2 adults in the classroom with the students, if not more, depending on the level of needs. So while we may have a diagnostic kindergarten class or 20 diagnostic kindergarten classes with 10 students each in them, the needs, the level and complexity of the needs would be different. And that's where we would be looking at what additional support is needed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Klein. Trustee Didivitis.
Thank you, through the chair. Just want to follow up through the chair on the same line of question on the same issue. So we are, the report is suggesting we're going to move from 8 students to 10. And I heard staff say, if they can confirm, that we would be in compliance with ministry guidelines, if we did that correct. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So I also understand from previous reports at this committee that the ministry gives us less money than what we actually spend on special education. And in fact, they call it overspending. And that's one of the points of contention, that we need more resources. There's more demand, and we find other resources to spend on special education. Is that correct?
The special education grant is a base amount, and we spend approximately $38 million outside of that sweatered envelope.
So it would be fair to say that the base amount standard, if I can use that word, is lower than the practice of the TDSB, and we felt it necessary to spend more resources in that minimum standard. My words.
I think those words are an accurate description.
Okay. So then I have to echo the sentiment of the parents that have been emailing us and writing us, and to say that we can meet the ministry standard when it's not our standard or has not historically been a standard. And while yes, we can add things to a classroom, I would find it difficult to say that we can replace the human-to-human interaction that happens in the classroom with the students that need the most one-to-one assistance. And that would be my position on that. So on another line of questioning, I also want to sort of understand, are we saying that with the level of funding that is currently projected, would we be able to aid a greater number of students? Is that what may be happening?
Thank you for the question and through the chair. So Trustee DeVitas, we again review every student's profile and the potential for placements of students within classes. And we are needing to make sure that students with special education needs in mainstream settings are also supported with appropriate levels of staff. This was an area of efficiency that we thought, again, enabled more students to access ISPs, because if we increase the ratio to 10 across all of our DK classes, more students are going to be accessing those classes. In addition, the educators, the fewer educators that may be gleaned, and it won't be a lot, may be able to be redirected again to other areas of the board that have high level of need.
Okay, so
we would also be likely reducing wait lists.
thank you. So that's something that I need to take a look at the report with greater detail to better understand that answer. Through the chair, what is staff's professional opinion on the level of service that we're able to provide to our students based on the changes that the sort of wider community have concern with?
Thank you for the opportunity to provide some reassurance through the chair. And I've said this to SEAC, as has Executive Superintendent Palmer. Our commitment is to be making sure our students are receiving the same level of support and service through the same amount of staffing that we have put in place. I'm wanting our parents to be reassured, because if we have a DK class that moves to 10, but they're a higher level of need, as Executive Superintendent Palmer said, if there is a need to add additional staffing support, we would do that. This is a routine analysis that we do annually in the special education plan to be finding to make our supports and services better and stronger. The fact that we are maintaining the level of staffing despite enrollment decreasing, I think is a testament to that level of commitment.
Thank you, through the chair. And I appreciate the commitment, and I support that commitment. But I also understand anecdotally through dozens and dozens of conversations that there's a big waiting list, that there's lots of folks out there that are not able to advocate and get into the space where they can receive the high level of service that their children may need. So I understand the overall enrollment numbers are changing over time, but I don't see the demand decreasing. So can you speak to what it means to say that the enrollment numbers are decreasing? Because I can't be to demand, and that has not decreased at all. If anything, it's increased because of COVID, amongst other things, over the last few years.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk about our increased numbers of ISPs, and I'll invite Executive Superintendent Palmer to talk about those numbers.
Thank you. So annually, we do look at engage in a process to open, close, or move intensive support programs based on needs. And while these numbers are changing on a daily basis as IPRCs are being completed and students are being placed and offers made to families, I can share just as a couple of examples that we are actually looking at opening 18 developmental disability ISPs for September 2025. So the staff, not only the teaching staff, but the support staff will need to come from our current allocation that has remained the same. Additionally, another example I would give is ASD or autism ISPs. We're looking at opening 11. And again, as IPRCs are being held, those numbers will likely increase. TDSB is in a unique situation because we are in Toronto and the GTA, and we have facilities such as Sick Kids Hospital and Holland Bloorview and other facilities that parents move to Toronto to be able to access. And so we have the students that come to TDSB. And so we need to be able to service the students. And as was mentioned earlier, increase the accessibility and reduce accessibility to the programs, both in the regular program, as parents have a right to choose that for their children, as well as in ISPs for students who may require a more intensive support program. And that's really what we look at, all the needs of all the students and how can we best do that without saying to a family who need for a student to be in an ISP, you have to wait for that. So those are the conversations around the efficiencies as well.
Okay, appreciate the answers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trustee DeVitis. Trustee Hassan, can I pass you the chair, sir?
The floor is yours, Trustee McLean.
Thank you, and through you. Given the challenges that we've had with the survey and reaction that the special education community has shared, can I ask staff what measures, if any, they're planning to take or that we traditionally take about the decisions that are made through the budget process?
Thank you. And through the chair, to the question at the heart of it is, how do we know our supports and services and our special education plan is meeting the needs of our students who are both identified as having an exceptionality or who may not have an exceptionality, such as students with ADHD or who have a mental health disability. Both of those examples are students who absolutely we have a duty to accommodate, and we do that through an IPRC process or through conversations at the school. We are actually in the midst of launching a special education review that we know is going to be generating a great amount of data and analysis. We have a consultation team made up of staff and SEAC members. That review absolutely will be providing feedback to us in the form of qualitative and quantitative data. Through the chair to the committee. In addition, we lean on our research and assessment department annually to be looking at our data of achievement and success for students that is disaggregated by many different types of identities, including special education, and trustees will think about the reports that we share with you. There's also feedback that we have at the SEAC table monthly, where we know there are pressure points for us to be paying attention to. We have an action plan in development. We just actually had a meeting today with our action planning team, focusing on 3 areas that have been co-identified: IEP development, professional learning, and communication to families. And SEAC provide us honest feedback on work that is yet to do. So there's a multitude of ways. In regards to the changes that appear in our special education plan, they come through as well in those different data sources. So I hope that is a small smattering of how we keep a pulse.
Thank you, and through the chair. So I probably asked it poorly, so I'll apologize. I wasn't referring as much to the operational decisions that staff is making as it pertains to this. This will be part of the process that goes to PSCs that tomorrow's committee will deal with and ultimately will make its way to the board. I was trying to get to, through you, Chair, the budget decisions on, and how they are related to the committee and to the greater public around what we announce and what we talk about. And because we traditionally make conversations around this table and at board, but because the survey went out and was extended in places that weren't traditionally listening, and people got wind of some information that, you know, probably wouldn't have been engaged in these kinds of conversations any other way. I'm looking at trying to understand either how we traditionally do it or how we're going to go about it differently this time around to reassure those who may have gotten the wrong impression, or because there are no cuts on the floor, there are no cuts on the you know, there are no budgetary measures here that negatively affect special education. And I'm concerned and trying to get to what I think that is the essence of number two, is a way that the community, not just but the greater community, will feel a little more comfort by knowing exactly what is being done and what's not being done by the committee and by the board.
Thank you. And through the chair, what I'll say is, for the last 2 years that I've been here, I believe, or at least for last year for sure, we did not make any reductions to special education funding compared to expenses. And we were really proud of that, and we are really proud of that. And we're proud that even though this is, again, a really challenging budget period, that we are not proposing any reductions to the spending in special education. So last year, after the budget was approved, we do a media release or a news release, and we highlighted that. We highlighted that we maintain special education investments. And so I assume that that would be similar practice to what we would do this year, is once approved, again, highlighting those things that we're really proud of. Last year, we talked about maintaining school positions. We talked about, you know, our supporting equitable outcomes like model schools, which is like something else that we were talking about tonight. We talked about maintaining special education investments and school budgets. So those things that we maintain in the budget decisions that trustees make are highlighted to the public via news releases, usually anyways, and we will continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes my questioning. So I'll take the chair back. Thank you, sir. And seeing no other questions on the floor, I think referrals probably can I get a motion for referral? We'll refer this back to staff so they can keep this in mind, and when they're making those announcements and those public declarations at the conclusion of this process. I need a mover and a seconder. Trustee Hassan will move. Trustee Rajwani will second. We're going to open the vote. All by hands. The toys aren't working, so we'll do a show of hands. All in favor? I'm going to need the trustees online to share how they're voting. Trustees opposed? So I got 3 yeses in the room, two noes. So I need. Carrie? Are they the only ones on the, are there no one? Trustee Wong. Trustee Wong, can you share how you vote, please? Trustee Patel, Trustee Shen, Trustee Lee. I don't know how many are here.
Apologies, Chair.
Sorry.
Chair, through you. I believe that number 2 should be what's on the screen and not number 1, as you determined that number 1 was out of order.
Yeah, number 2 is the only thing that's live. And that's what we're voting on at the moment. It's referral of number 2. Okay, I need the trustees in the room, their votes have been recorded. I need sorry? I voted, and Rajwani were in favor. Trustee D. DeVitas.
Patel in favor.
Trustee Patel is in favor. Thank you. Trustee Lee.
Shan in favor.
Trustee Lee is in favor. Trustee Shan.
Shan in favor.
Trustee Shan is in favor. Trustee Wong.
I voted on e-scribe.
We didn't open it. How did? Oh, apparently, okay, sorry. I was told we weren't doing that. So we're good then? We got everybody? Earhart voted opposed. Earhart voted no. So that passes 6-3. The record we will change the record to reflect there were 3 no votes. Earhart, DeVitas, and no, hold on. 2, 4, 6, 8.
Through the chair, I'd like to move a business arising motion.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we put this to. We got it? We're 6-3, so 7-2. 7-2? Wong. Yep. No, she said she voted through the toy.
She voted in scribe, she said in favor. I think she said in favor, but she said she voted in scribe.
Okay, so it passed 7-2 in favor. Now, before we go to the IC, we have a business arising motion from Trustee Earhart.
Thank you very much. And so through the chair, I wasn't in the room when our SEAC co-chair delegated, but I do wish to reassure the SEAC co-chair David and also other SEAC members who may be watching that I did hear what was transpiring. And while I wish I could move more at this time, because I heard what you were asking for, and I wish that that is something that I could see implemented at the TDSB at this time, because I know all too well how it feels when you hear that the top level number isn't changing, but the supports for your child are shifting. And so I want to acknowledge that trustees are hearing that. We have to figure out what to do with that. But we are hearing it. We are listening. But I would like to move a motion related to point 3. I just emailed it around quickly that and this is acknowledging the recommendation of SEAC that there be an apology. That the TDSB board apologizes for the inclusion of special education in the 2025-26 TDSB budget survey to be conveyed through a statement by the chair.
Can I respectfully ask the trustee to include the words Board of Trustees in the motion?
The Board of
to
Trustees,
make
yes.
it abundantly clear
Who
this directs and who it does not?
Yes, I'll reread it right now with those words to be clear. That the TDSB Board of Trustees apologizes for the inclusion of special education in the 2025-26 TDSB budget survey to be conveyed through a statement by the chair.
And Trustee Rajwani has agreed to second. Do you wish to speak to this?
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm seconding this because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, thank you. We'll open the floor. The governance staff is working on putting it on the screen so that we can see it. Trustee Hassan?
Trustee Hassan in favor?
No, sorry. Before we put it on the floor, we're going to open it for people to share their perspectives, ask questions, potentially make modifications. Do any trustees wish to be heard while we get it and we can put it display for everyone to see? Seeing no questions, we'll open the vote, please.
Trustee Hassan in favor?
Taylor in favor.
McLean in favor.
San in
David in
favor.
favor.
Wong in favor.
Shan in favor.
We're good. Trustee Lee, can you share how you vote, please? Trustee Lee? We'll assume that Trustee Lee had to step away. We'll mark him absent. We close the vote, please. And that passes. Okay, and with that, we will go to our 5.2, which is our intercity Community Advisory Committee report dated May 22nd, 2025. Should have had this all set up a minute ago. Omar, your last name is avoiding me and I apologize. Sorry. Mr. Khan, thank you for your service on the committee and your willingness to come here tonight and share the perspective of the committee. You do. If I'd have known I had the mic time, I'd have spent more time ruffling through my papers and not had to.
Okay. Everyone hear me? Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Omar. I'm Omar Khan. I'm the Intercity Community Advisory Committee co-chair. I first want to start with a big thanks to all the people who delegated today, especially those who spoke to the vital importance of the PCCW role. For those of you who weren't here, that started at 2:30, and really thank the committee for allowing that. We had so many parents who wanted to speak to this. I actually have like 4 more delegations here of people who couldn't make it, but they emailed in what they shared because that role matters so much to them. So at ICCAC, we're very lucky that we've been able to do an in-person meeting, 2 in-person meetings this year, one at Corvette School in January over in Scarborough, and more recently in May at Fir Grove Public School. And that's up in the Jane and Finch area. And just like today, what we heard from the parents, we heard from many parents and caregivers how crucial the parent caregiver community engagement worker role is. And in fact, so many of them are in the room today, right back here. We have a lot of our PCCWs, and I'm really feel very supported by them. So doing a little bit of history, actually, Fir Grove was the first of 3 model schools piloted in 2005. Each school was given $1 million to transform. $1 million. Like, can you believe that? Each of those schools was given $1 million. And these were schools with external challenges like higher levels of low-income households in the community. And so early success there prompted the expansion of the Model Schools program, though the funding directed to model schools by the board got diluted in the years following the massive investment in 2005. And from the very beginning, Model Schools has had 5 pillars. And one of those pillars was and still is, and I'm going to quote, establishing schools as the heart of the community. And so a lot of you still use the term CSWs. It's the same thing. The community support workers are now called the parent, caregiver, and community engagement workers. So they were and are crucial to this work, and which they do in collaboration with school leadership through establishing active partnerships with parents, community members, and community organizations. And so one of the conditions for success for model schools, as identified by the TDSB Research Department in 2018, is, and again I quote, continuous efforts and resources to address recurring or changing external challenges. So, this is what PCCWs do. You heard it today during the delegation period. They are part of the bedrock of model schools. And today with the affordability crisis, which is hitting vulnerable communities in Toronto particularly hard, we have PCCWs like Babak and Omar back there, and the whole team, for example, setting up resource centers at schools like Alaya Middle School to serve families all around the area who are struggling to have food, to have the right clothes, so that those kids have the basics in place to succeed at school. And that kind of work is in jeopardy if we lose PCCWs. But in a city with a growing affordability crisis and growing income inequality, the PCCWs are needed more than ever. And so actually many of you know me because I've come to FBEC in previous years and said, hey, we need more community support workers, now PCCWs, because of all the amazing things they do. The things that model schools need to succeed have actually been whittled away over the years. There used to be school clusters. The clusters used to have steering principals. There were learning coaches. There were lead teachers. All of that model is gone. PCCWs, a bedrock piece, continue to be there. And giving all the staff notice that the role may not exist come September 2025 is honestly a mortal blow to the program that has already sadly been eroded over the last 15 years. It's a blow that we had such upset parents at our Fir Grove meeting, like such passion and like really tears. I talked to some of the parents, like this might come to pass. And so I just want to remind FBEC about the money the province provides to support lower income school communities. In the past, there was the Learning Opportunities Grant, the demographic allocation, or the LOG-DA. And the school board would get somewhere between 130 and 150 million every year with essentially no strings attached. The province changed the funding formula a few years ago, but the amounts are still roughly the same based on my calculations. They're divided between two pots: the classroom staffing fund, demographic needs component, and the learning resources fund, demographic needs component. So that's like the new budget model. And these total around 155 million. So this is what the province writes about these components. So I'm quoting, the demographic needs component provides funding based on social and economic indicators that are associated with students facing barriers to success. This component supports school boards in offering a wide range of programs tailored to the local needs of their students. So for the classroom staffing fund, again, quoting, examples of programs include reading recovery and withdrawal for individualized support. And for the learning resources demographic needs component, examples of programs include provision of nutrition programs and homework clubs. But again, quoting, school boards have considerable latitude in determining the types of program and support that they provide with this funding. So this has been talked about a lot here, elsewhere. Like in the last 5 to 10 years, I think there have been multiple headlines in the Toronto Star that low-income schools have been underfunded by potentially $1 billion plus because the money, that 150 million-ish, gets diverted elsewhere. And I think the statement that's been used over many years is like, we are stealing from Peter to pay Paul. When one of our former ICCAC members, Professor David Clanfield, tried valiantly to determine how much of this roughly 150 million actually went to low-income communities in the model schools program, like his best efforts at that, and being liberal with numbers, for the model schools program itself, he could only account for maybe like 11 million. So I dug into the technical reports and budget numbers that were just released in the last week or two, and did some math on how on something that the province always rolls up publicly, the demographic component total by school. And so in my math, the model schools, just for everyone's memory, which are the top 150 or so elementary schools on the Learning Opportunities Index, are allocated, are used to allocate from the province about $60 million of the demographic needs component of those two funds, the CSF and the LRF. So it's 60 million. So the question our committee always has is what fraction of that money that is the province says is for students facing barriers, socio-demographic, socioeconomic barriers. They base it on low income households. What percentage of that does the TDSB actually use in those communities for additional differentiated support in those schools? And I think we all know here it's way less than 60 million. So this stealing from Peter to pay Paul argument has always been our justification to come here and say, strengthen the PCCEW program, strengthen the model schools program. The money is there for it. And yet, because the province underfunds everything else, this money for low-income communities is given by the province with essentially no strings attached and no oversight, and the board plugs leaks with it. But can you imagine the justifiable uproar if TDSB actually used less than, say, the allocated special education budget for special education needs and spent it elsewhere to cover justifiable costs, right? And yet we do that every year to low-income communities, every single year. And now somehow at the TDSB, we have the gall to put the PCCWs on the chopping block, right? Because they all did get notices. And so their funding is not coming from core funding, even though we have 150 million, 155 million that could justifiably be used to spend on CSWs, on PCCEWs. And I just say for shame, like most of my anger is directed towards the province who puts us in this terrible situation. But also I'm angry because we come to the board over and over and over and say, you have this demographic allocation that is for low-income communities. And instead, we see the erosion of the model school program. And we've seen it during the Ford government, but we saw it during Liberal governments before that. So I just want to end by saying that, every board document I look at has, like in the preamble, this line about equity. Equity is foundational to all TDSB work and will be embraced throughout the strategic directions. So the trustees really need to stand by this. You got to pass a motion first that protects our PCCEWs and that role, but goes beyond that and uses core funding to fund like the needs in low-income communities. How much more money are we going to take that is money allocated for low-income communities and not allocated and is not getting allocated to vital programs like model schools in the PCCEW role? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Trustee DeVitas.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to say that after being on this committee for almost 3 years now, I've learned a number of things from the presentation. I found it quite informative. So just want to start by saying I thank you for putting together the information. So let me ask, because I've seen from time to time some of us, some of my colleagues ask for some detail from some of what you presented here. Where did you find this information? Because we've asked staff for similar type reports about the Learning Opportunity Grant before it was changed. I haven't seen it yet, but like where was all this put together from?
So the technical documents were released recently, like the technical documents around the Ministry of Education funding. And there are the detailed funding documents, like the regulations from 2024, 2025. So basically the technical documents say there are funding units that are determined for every school in the province. There are a certain number of funding units that are determined based on what percentage of the students in that school are from low-income households. But the province actually also releases that data, the percentage of students who come from low-income households, as part of their open data project. It's on the open data catalog. You can get the list of all the schools from in the province that has both their enrollment and their percent of low-income students. And so for 2024, 2025, in the released regulations, the TDSB gets 455,496.1023 funding units. And in the documents for 2025, 2026, the ministry has released publicly how much of that goes towards the CSF demographic allocation, how much that goes towards the Learning Resources Fund allocation. So putting that all together, you can make an estimate. And I would say it's a pretty close estimate of like what is like on a school by school basis, like how the province is calculating the total number that goes to the board. And I get that they don't expect necessarily the board to allocate exactly that amount of money to that school, but at an aggregate, we can look at all the model schools, and all the model schools are, because of their low income household situation, they are helping to bring in an additional like 60 million-ish to the board that then, unfortunately, since it's not sweatered, can do whatever they want with it.
And if I can ask a follow-up question, do you have a sense of how we at the Toronto District School Board spend that estimated $60 million?
Well, so on the total for the demographic allocation, which is around 150 million, there have been a number of reports from Social Planning Toronto, I think from People for Education, from our own membership, that have like tried really hard to figure out how much of that goes towards different like LOI related initiatives. I said before that maybe around 11 million, maybe it's a little bit more now, goes towards model schools specifically. When our committee tried to work through that number, and I think they worked with Craig Snyder and his team like on that, the number that they could get to, being very generous with thinking about like what is considered like, LOI related. I think they got up to maybe 60 million of like 130 million for that year. So less than half actually goes towards like the socio-demographic needs. That is the spirit of the demographic allocation as written by the Ministry of Education. And then it's going towards other things. But like, I'm not saying those other things aren't needed, right? But those like low income communities need that money. Like now, yesterday, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, they have always needed it. And we've constantly taken from Peter to pay Paul.
And Omar, do you have a sense of what the other elements are? Or has the TDSB ever reported out on the details of how some of that spending is structured? Obviously, it's spent. We have a deficit, so we're spending every dollar. But what is it spent on? Have you seen this information? What's been the process? Because you're describing third parties.
Yeah, our committee has never received a report that says, okay, here's the demographic allocation, and this is where it goes to here, and this is where it goes to here, and this is where it goes to here. I think what we've been told is because it's an unsweatered fund, that it is not thought of in that way. It goes into like general revenue and like can be used as it will be used. And there isn't oversight from the ministry on how that money is spent. Like there have been, I think like John Malloy was interviewed like in 2015, 2016 about like what was his response to like how this money was spent. And he would say, outdoor education might receive that funding, but because low income students use outdoor education, but lots of students use outdoor education, right? And so that money was supporting everyone, including some low income students. I've heard from senior leadership that if there is a student with special needs in a model school, then the demographic allocation could be used to support their special needs, which I think is totally wrong. The special education funding should be used to support their needs. And if there's additional needs, that can come from the demographic allocation. But I guess my main point is, I've heard from how this money is spent, and this money is spent, I would say, in a way that strikes me as not, I have a different read of what the spirit of that money is supposed to be spent for than what I've heard from senior leadership.
Okay, but you haven't seen a report that spells out.
We have asked for a report, and I think it's just been lost in, like, we have brought out here asking for that, and it has been sent to staff, and we have never received that report.
Okay, so to go back to, I called them CSWs, the SCIDOM is still the SCIDOM in my head, right?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So to go back to the CSWs, you made reference to a meeting at Fairgrove. Fairgrove, again, one of the 3 original schools in the model school program. So can you elaborate a little bit, because I was only there for a very short while, what the general sentiment and what the general concern from the folks at the advisory committee meeting, what were they trying to communicate to us here at the school board?
So actually in the whereas, in that first whereas clause, those are all items that came from the Fir Grove parents. So there was a lot of talk about school councils not being effective till PCCW stepped up and helped school councils become effective. I think the Afrocentric school particularly mentioned that they have a school council now that has like 40 parents involved. And they were like, we could not have done this without our PCCW. It would have been impossible. Connecting, linking families with essential resources. So there was so much talk about Kofi, one of the PCCWs, who has helped people get connected with like food bank resources, with other resources in the community, in particular helping like newcomer refugees and claimants, refugee claimants, like get connected with the resources they need in the community, because he knows, he's been in that community, he knows how to do that kind of connection. But for a lot of parents, they have no idea, but they need the resources. Providing practical support during crises. I think that was one example, but the other example that we always hear about is about COVID. And during COVID time, people not being able to access food banks, not having food, and the PCCWs getting the grocery cards out there, getting food out there, going to people's houses and delivering food. The PCCWs, like the feeling of love towards them at Fir Grove and at Corvette was like really visceral. We felt it in the room, like the members of ICCAC, we could feel that love that was directed towards the PCCWs, because for a lot of the school council members who came to speak to us, they were saying we would not be here and our school kids would not be doing so well but for the PCCWs.
Thank you for that. So to the chair, a couple of questions about process. So questions of staff are after questions of the presenter, correct?
That's correct. We'll deal with the report from the committee initially, and then we'll deal with the recommendation. And when the recommendation is on the floor, we can all ask questions that are relevant of staff.
Okay, and there is on the report a recommendation. The recommendation has to be moved by one of us in order to be action, correct?
Sorry?
There's a motion, right? Does the motion need to be moved in order for it to be contemplated, or how does it get on the floor? The motion that the advisory committee has there.
Yeah, apparently we did the last item incorrectly. We just we left it on the floor. We didn't put it on the floor. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yes, we'll get a mover and a seconder.
So we would need a mover and a seconder. Okay. And can I ask, Chair, because the wording is from the committee to us, we wouldn't necessarily move it in the same way, maybe. I don't know. Like, have you looked at the wording? Do we need to make any changes, or do we have that conversation later?
Well, the committee's recommendation makes two recommend. One is being fulfilled at the moment. So the committee doesn't need to act on two because it is redundant, because Mr. Khan is speaking before us today, sharing the perspectives of the committee and bringing forth the recommendation. The first recommendation is fair, and the staff in question were given notices in light of the overall budget, although there are no current options to balance that are considering the reduction of these positions either in whole or in part until the notices are necessary, because until we complete the budget process, we keep options open, even those we're not considering, we keep options open until the process closes. So as such, this is number one is fine, number two is redundant, and we won't be voting.
Got it. And so we'll just need a mover and a seconder when we get to that
Apparently,
stage.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the time.
Okay. And with that, and there's no further questions for you, Mr. Khan, we thank you very much for your presentation and your ongoing work on the committee that you've been, I've served on the committee for years, a couple of years ago, and a number of years, and you have been working hard, and we appreciate the committee's efforts and your willingness to share their perspectives here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you,
So I
Chair.
need a mover and seconder to put number 1 on the floor. Know what you said? I'm trying to take direction well. You told me we needed a mover and seconder. Trustee DeVitas wants to move. Trustee Hassan will second. Now, it's on the floor. All right, now we're good. Trustee Dawson, it's my understanding you have the floor.
Thank you. I was just frantically typing question in the chat. Through the chair, thank you so much to the ICCAC committee for bringing this forward. I know that it has been of paramount concern to the students, families, and staff at our model schools, the potential for losing the PCC-EW role. I was wondering if staff could just sort of clarify for us what exactly happened and why the PCC-EWs were given notice. Through the chair.
Through you, Chair, I'll start, and other colleagues will may add. So I'll start, and Executive Officer Mark Ellis, who's online, will add. Through you, Chair, to Trustee Dawson. I believe that the explanation provided by the chair earlier in response to a question from Trustee DeVitas is helpful in respect to the question you asked Trustee Dawson about what happened here in terms of the notices that were given. In an earlier FBEC meeting, as options were being presented for trustees' consideration, options to balance, we talked about, staff talked about the need to keep options open until the budget is finally approved. And that included options for certain staff roles that had collective agreement timelines associated with them. So in collective agreements, there are certain roles that have specific dates by which decisions need to be made if notices, surplus notices are to be given. When a surplus notice is given for particular roles, it does not necessarily mean that an individual who receives a surplus notice will lose their job and no longer be working for the board. But it could mean that a role is surplus to a location. It could mean that a role could end up being redundant to the board. But at this stage, it did not mean either of those things. It just meant that if there was the potential, although extreme, that such a decision could be made, that we needed to do so within the collective agreement timelines. Otherwise, that option would be gone. And so before I pass it on to the executive officer, what I'll share a hypothetical. For the options that were presented, because I think the chair identified correctly earlier that the PCC-EW roles have not been tabled by staff for reduction. However, there were a number of options that were tabled by staff for trustees' consideration. And if trustees should hypothetically decide that we don't like any of those options, go and find more options and present them to us for consideration to balance a budget, then we'd have to go and find other options. And that could include things that we had not previously considered before. And so although the PCCEW roles were never in consideration in the options presented, all options had to be kept open until trustees make a decision ultimately about how you will reach a balanced budget, which again is the responsibility of staff to provide options and the responsibility of trustees to consider those options. So I'll pass the mic to Executive Officer Ellis to add further clarification to
that. Thank you. And through the chair, I have nothing further to add. Clayton, you covered it very well. Thank you.
Thank you for that helpful response. So just a follow-up question. This is the first time that I believe we've seen this role and possibly some other roles given notice like this. And I just wondered if it had anything to do with our receiving the core education funding late.
Through the chair, that is absolutely part of the reason. And also, we haven't been in a situation before where we don't have a balanced budget and we don't have reserves to be able to use to offset it. So I think those two things combined have led us here.
Okay, thank you. And then just to my colleagues, I am in support of this motion. I was in the ICCAC meeting when it was developed, and there was a very passionate group of almost all of the PCCEWs, but supported by so many parents as well. So, you know, this is really a huge need for the community. And like one of the delegates said, you know, these roles serve a quarter of our student population, and it's really worth considering keeping them as they play a vital role in thriving school communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Dawson. Trustee Hassan.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. First and foremost, I want to thank all the PCCs that are here tonight. You guys mean the most to the communities that I represent, and I'm very thankful for each and every one of you and all the support you guys have done for me and the communities that I represent as well as other trustees too. I know like Kadra, Hugh, Omar, and all of you, like I've had the chance to work with you, and I see the work that you guys do day in and day and night, and how you guys make the job of trustees and superintendents and principals much easier. And I see it every day. I think I've had like the past 2 weeks, maybe over 10 encounters with you guys. So positive encounters. So I appreciate that. And I think my question is through you, Chair, for staff. It's when you send out these surplus letters, obviously you can imagine how alarming that is for our workers, right, our staff, but also for community members when they hear this and how they're losing support. So I just want to know a little bit about that process. I know, Director, you did clarify a few points there. Obviously, nothing is being guaranteed here. Nothing, like we're not saying we're going to get rid of them, but you just have to do that just in case of the wildest chance does happen. But I just want to ask, when you send out these letters, who else have you sent out these letters to? What other positions have you sent it out to?
Through you, Chair. I will ask Executive Officer Ellis to respond to that. I believe that in previous meetings, we have covered some of that information, but appreciate the opportunity to provide some further clarification around that. I think that this has certainly been a challenging budget development process, as has been the case in TDSB over years due to the challenges that have been, well articulated by trustees. So several positions did receive notices. I will take the opportunity before I pass the microphone to the executive officer to just add a couple of comments. Recognizing the risk in doing so. But as secretary of the board, I have certain responsibilities, including in this regard. Again, taking my responsibility as director very seriously, and supported by the staff in keeping all options open to support trustees in their responsibility, your responsibility to pass a balanced budget and to navigate that challenging budget development process. I do think that it is concerning, as valuable as the PCCEW role is, so is every other role in the board. This role absolutely supports parents and caregivers. I see the value. I have met and spoken with PCCEWs. We heard the delegation that spoke about their impact and so forth. However, in principle, I do think that it is concerning to identify a particular staff role because, in fact, what that does is say that this is the way that we do business for individual staff or staff roles to advocate directly to trustees for in this type of forum. So that does not speak to the value of the role, but it does speak to appropriateness, in my view, of process when it comes to how these decisions are considered and made. I do believe that there are other forums that are appropriate for considerations such as this in terms of employee representatives and such. So I do want to just identify that for trustees' consideration as I pass the microphone to not Trustee Ellis. I don't think that's what you're aiming for, Executive Officer Ellis, but for you to respond to the question about other roles that received notices in the same context that I described, where it's about keeping options open so that we as staff can support the opportunity for trustees to consider how best to utilize the limited funds that TDSB receives to meet the great needs that TDSB has. Over to you, Executive Officer Ellis.
Thank you, and through the chair. We have specific timelines embedded within our collective agreements that we must achieve, and we must comply with. So some of those timelines are extended up to the beginning of June. And based on the timing this year, we were in danger of triggering some of those timelines. So to keep options open for the board, we did issue all the required notifications to ensure that we were in compliance with our collective agreements.
No, sorry, I just wanted to, through you, Chair, I was trying to clarify which other positions received the surplus letters as well.
There was a variety, sorry, through the chair, there was a variety of positions all covered through our QP collective agreement.
Okay.
Through the chair,
you?
Sorry, I just want to add, I believe that it was intended to be provided through Trustee Weekly, and I'm just confirming whether or not that was done, but the list was going to be provided to trustees.
It was provided or is going to be provided?
It was supposed to be, and so I'm just confirming whether or not it has been.
Okay. So the reason why I asked this is because just as a form of transparency, we have our PCCs here, we have people watching online. I want people to know what positions were put up or were given surplus letters. I think it's very important to know this information, and I hope that we can get that soon. I'm glad, Director, I'm glad that you agree with me and many trustees here how important the PCC role is, and they're here to hear that, and that means a lot. So when it comes to this report, I will be supporting it. I will not be supporting any cuts towards PCCs, and I ask my trustee colleagues to do the same as well. Like I mentioned, I see the work that they do in community, and it's imperative that we keep these roles there. And I asked about the other positions as well, because if you're sending out surplus letters to roles like this, it's concerning to me, and I want to know who else received these letters as well. I know social workers have been reaching out to me as well too, and they're concerned. And in my head, I'm trying to fathom and understand why some of the most critical roles that we have on the ground that deal with our day-to-day grassroots situations that deal directly with communities in some of the most under-resourced, underfunded areas in Toronto. Why those people would be brought up first. And that's my concern mainly. And that's why I asked about the other positions too.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So I'm sorry that trustees didn't receive that information yet. We'll ensure that that you do. I think that I'll just harken back to previous comments around the collective agreement timelines and the way that those timelines affect certain roles. It's not about the value of those roles. It's about the process. And if trustees, again, if we should get to June 16th, FBEC and trustees should decide that of all the options presented, again, we reject the following, then staff would have to go back and dig deeper and would find perhaps even less desirable positions or funding sources to bring back. And so it's incumbent on us to keep those options open until such time as trustees make final decisions. So just want to reiterate that it's not about the value of the roles, but it is about the collective agreement timelines and the process around that. But we will make sure that we get the list to trustees.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So when we look at, like, obviously trustees, you mentioned that a few times, trustees, you guys are going to bring us the reports and we have to vote on it and we choose the options. But it's just sort of like, my question is why certain options are being brought to us, right? You make our decision sometimes a little bit more difficult than it should be. So I hope to get that list of information of the roles that received the surplus letters. And once again, I want to thank Omar Khan. I thank all our PCCs tonight. You guys have my support, and I will not be supporting any cuts towards your positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Hassan. And just to clarify with staff, we're going to confirm that we're going to get that information Friday in Trustee Weekly?
Through the chair, yes. And I will say that in looking at the list that I have in front of me, we have some positions that get a surplus notification every single year, right? And so those people that happens to were included in this list as well. So I don't want trustees to get a list of 2,000 staff, which is what the number that I have in front of me, and say, oh my goodness, 2,000 staff got this, and when maybe more than half of them already receive that notification every year as part of the process. So that's why there was a delay, and I apologize. There's been a lot going on, and so I'll take ownership for why, because when I got the list, I didn't want to provide just a list without some context with it. But I can say that, there are some positions that this PCCEWs were certainly on the list. There were some mental health supports like child and youth counselors that were specific to certain areas. There were some library techs that were on there. There were some school-based safety monitors that were on there. There were some payroll staff on there. So it really does, I think, need some context rather than trustees to just get a list, or else it's not going to provide you with enough information. But I promise that it will be there on Friday.
Thank you. Did you want?
Yeah, just my last question. Sorry, I wanted to add this in is when we're looking at, once again, the options that you guys provide us in terms of where cuts should be made, why wasn't other motions that were brought forward by trustees? I'll give an example. Trustee Patel brought forward a motion where it directs staff to look at central staff, correct? So how come those options are not being brought forward as opposed to the frontline workers that are needed in the most under-resourced communities?
So through the chair, that motion passed on May 21st, and today is June 4th. So it is being considered as part of it, and the responses to the motion are in today's report. So anything that was passed as a motion would be certainly considered. and we wouldn't be giving senior team surplus notifications, right? So it's a different process depending on the collective agreement. And I did just confirm all of our special needs assistants, as part of their collective agreement provisions, receive a surplus notification every year as part of a collective agreement. So they would have received 716 of them, I can see on this list, would have received surplus notifications because it's part of their collective agreement. So again, without that context, I don't think that just providing the list is appropriate. And we are considering everything that trustees have proposed, and we will be bringing it back. And again, there were responses to the motions from the last board meeting today when we get to the budget.
Thank you. So just want to clarify on one point you mentioned there. Every year they receive surplus notes because of the agreements, but there's also those who are receiving surplus notes because of possible budget cuts. So two different things, correct?
That's correct. And that's why this list, I have a list right now in front of me of 2010 people. I need to know before I provide the list to the trustees, which ones are always part of it and which ones are budget. And once we have that list, we will provide trustees with the budget specific ones.
Thank you, Executive Officer Stacy Zucker. You're much appreciated. Thank you, staff. And thank you to everyone who came tonight, especially our PCCs.
Thank you, Trustee Hassan. Trustee Shen.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I want to start off by thanking all of the PCCEWs for the work they do in the community, and also ICCAC for the advocacy they have done around this. I'm still struggling with this when I hear that these surplus notices were provided as a way to keep the options to balance the budget. If that is the case, I have very serious concerns around some of the things around process. I understand this particular job title, folks with this job title are here, but there's been some concern, and I want to reiterate that concern. This was not brought forward as an option to balance to begin with. My question first is that when aquatic instructors and music instructors were brought as options to balance, and this set of staff members were not brought as an option to balance, why did we proceed with the surplus notice? And why did we feel that one set of job postings needed to be considered at the board level? The other one could have been done operationally. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff.
So thank you, and through the chair. So when staff proposed options to balance, those options to balance were brought forward, and as a result, there were surplus notifications provided to those individuals in order to allow trustees to make the decision. As we got later in the year, and we know that, for example, $10 million was taken off the table with the motion to not reconsider or to follow through on decisions that were previously made with regards to the COVID positions, then we knew that in order to get to balanced, we would have to find $10 million more dollars. And when 85% of our budget is staff, there aren't a lot of other places to look. And so again, to preserve the decision-making of trustees, we had to provide surplus notifications to anyone who was impacted by collective agreement timelines. So it's not like we chose some over the other. The reason that some employees may have received them and some not really has to do with collective agreement timelines or decisions that have been made through school-based staffing that have already been approved by trustees.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I get that, but I'm not understanding why a particular role has been fully taken into consideration for this surplus notice, because I'm not hearing from the staff if there was any other job titles that were receiving surplus notice in its entirety other than PCCEW that did not come to board. I'm yet to hear that response. So if this was the only group of positions that were receiving surplus notice, I have a concern because, sometimes there's a serious concern in the community when it comes to budget cuts. Equity-seeking, equity-deserving communities, low-income communities get targeted. And what this has done is basically made that concern amplified. Whether it's perception or reality is something to be addressed. But if it is the case that these positions were not brought to the board, but were actually operationally addressed as surplus, and on the other hand, we've brought concerns around music instructions and aquatic instructors and so on, and we waited till the board make a decision around some of those timelines to proceed. And then we had those conversations. I'm understanding that there's a bit of double standards on these positions, whether it be purposely done or whether it be strategically done, whether it be operationally done because of the situation we were getting into. But we have to be very careful, as there is a serious concern when it comes to the community as how it is perceived. And in fact, we know, those who perceive it know, because we experience it, that when it comes to budgets, the communities that are seen as most likely to not come into a boardroom, not having these large email campaigns and so on, tend to get the least amount of attention when something that is devastating is put in place. So I hope, I'm hopeful that that was not the case, but I do think if it was done for whatever reason, it still was not done the right way, because this is actually perpetuating that feeling and reinforcing that feeling that when we know those certain communities that are further marginalized and don't have the resources to organize and come to delegations and to be present, then we take them differently from those who are able to bring their families to the boardroom and have the kind of the resources and be the affluence to advocate. Then it's taken differently. So I want to kind of reiterate the point. The reason we are here is not that one particular group of positions are more important than the others. The reason we are discussing this in this way is that this particular group of positions is impacting, cuts to these positions will impact equity deserving communities in a way that sometimes is taken for granted in our system. So I hope that is understood and clear. Thank you.
If I may, through you, Chair, Trustee Shan, I appreciate your comments. And I do want to explicitly presume positive intentions, and in that I do not believe that you would be indicating that staff are in any way being sort of isolating positions that serve or most underserved communities. I do want to use the opportunity to absolutely reiterate staff's commitment to each and every student, staff commitments to our board's equity commitments, to make sure that that we lift every student up, in particular those that require the most support. That is our firm commitment. And that happens in terms of programming decisions, that happens in terms of financial decisions, and all of our operational decisions. And in respect of options brought to the board, staff, as you know, Trustee Shan, have gone above and beyond to look under every rock. And you know, I think the piece that I would add to what you've shared, fully acknowledging that when it comes to PCCEWs, the service is provided to our most underserved schools and school communities. You know, I do want to say that the schools in the higher socioeconomic, you know, status areas don't have some of the I hate to call it extras because they're not extras, but some of the additional supports that are absolutely needed in some of our underserved schools. But I believe, Trustee Shan, you would recall that staff brought a range of options, including IMIs that service schools across the board and across communities, including pools that are located across the board and are concentrated in certain areas of the board. So we left no stones unturned in terms of options that were brought forward to trustees. So I appreciate, Trustee Shan, the need to underscore the board's commitment to making sure that all students are well served, and especially those that require the most support. But I do want to make sure that it's understood that that is also where staff sit, and I believe that's what I don't believe that you intended not to communicate that. So I just wanted to underscore that, and I will ask Associate Director Zucker to add.
Thank you, and through the chair and Chair Shade, I just wanted to confirm there are 119 different types of positions that were provided surplus notifications. So I appreciate the passion and the for this particular group, but there were 119 other job classifications that were impacted by this process.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, my concern is I'm not alluding to any intention of the staff. I'm only saying that when there are already perceptions and feelings out there that equity-related staff do not get the necessary attention when it goes through cuts, it's important for us to have had the same level of discussion about the surplus letters that are potentially going to PCCEW at this board table in the past few months before it went out. That's all I'm saying, because it's important for us to show that these positions are important and they require the kinds of consideration that we've had when we discussed music instructors, when we did swimming pool, outdoor education. We definitely would have had to have the same level of, if not more, of the conversation at the boardroom before these letters went out and we were caught off guard. So I think it's important to communicate that importance. Even if we feel it, it is important to communicate that importance through our actions and how we discuss these cuts and potential cuts. So that's why I'm raising this concern, and I hope it's clear. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff.
Thank you, Trustee Shan. Trustee Sriskandarajah.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to start by saying thank you to the committee for and Mr. Khan for that wonderful, informative presentation. I also want to, echo my colleagues, would not, of course, support cuts to such a pivotal role in our communities. These child and youth workers, I forget the new acronym, they are really the glue that keeps our communities together. And, more of a comment, I just want to share, especially for the employees when they receive the notices, being in that position, I don't even want to imagine thinking that you might not have a job. At this, our support for you, and I'm personally not in support of these cuts if they were to come to the table. But the silver lining of all this, if there is one, is I think it was a really, because of this, one of the unintentional outcomes of this exercise is that the boardroom got to hear from different parts of the city just how important these folks are in our system. And I think sometimes we really need a reminder at this central table. And so I appreciate all the advocacy. I heard it from my own model schools, and to see parents in my model schools, as was mentioned by other trustees, are often don't have the privileges that allow them to come into these spaces. To see them so passionate, so mobilized around this issue just shows how important these folks are in our system. And so I saw an uptick of that engagement in our budget process. So if there was an unintended good thing that came out of it, I do think it's that. And I do want to say thank you to staff. I know what you're doing is incredibly, incredibly hard. And, I don't want us to take the attention away from the fact that this is due to chronic underfunding from the province. And my interpretation, at least from what I'm hearing, was that staff intention was that this is not on the table, that we have other options on the table that do target more privileged, higher LOIs, resources like the pools and, I don't have to go through all of that again. And that this was something that's not on the table, but could be on the table if we don't. Obviously not ideal, but I do see that what staff have to work with. And so I, just want to recognize, I appreciate, that you're in a really, really tough position, of course, as are we. So I just wanted to share those two thoughts. Thank you.
Chair, may I just acknowledge briefly through you appreciation for your comments and for the earlier questions as well from Trustee Shen and others. I also wanted to offer that staff operated from an understanding that a motion moved by a trustee in an earlier FBEC meeting would not prevent staff from doing what was necessary to keep options open, which included issuing surplus notices, but that we would not proceed with actually moving to a further step to indicate that someone would be declared redundant to the board. And so we absolutely believe as staff that we were acting in accordance with our responsibility to keep options open, to support trustees in the duty that you have to approve a balanced budget and acting in accordance with the motions previously passed by the board. And just want to acknowledge what everyone has as well, that this is an incredibly difficult process for everyone, and it is not without impact all around. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Does that complete your questions, Trustee Shishkandaraja?
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Rajwani.
Thank you, and through the chair, my colleagues have covered a lot of things that I wanted to say, but again, I just want to commend staff. I know this is a lot of work. This is a really difficult process due to a really difficult position that we've been put in. But I also want to acknowledge that our people are our greatest strength at TDSB. In particular, when we speak about parent and community engagement workers, we need to amplify their roles, amplify those that they serve, because we know that every day that they go out and support our families one-on-one and make true impact. I often talk about how education is the greatest equalizer, but that can only happen if we have the right supports in place, and that often is people. I wanted to also acknowledge and share that I feel very empathetic for anybody that received one of those letters. We talk about it as process and operations, but it's over 100 people that got these notices, and that can't be a very good feeling to get a notice like that. And to staff, I'd like to understand, when you are going through this process and you're put in a position where you have to give these types of letters out, how is that impacting our staff retention? How is that impacting staff motivation? How do we keep going when we're in this type of position and our staff are put in this type of position as we're going through this operational budget process? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think I'll begin my response and perhaps ask Executive Officer Ellis to add to this, as he is Mr. People and Culture. I think I'll begin the response where I ended my last, that we as staff recognize that all of these decisions and all of these processes involve and impact people. And I think that it's not accidental that prior to my arrival, the decision was made to really focus attention on the people aspect of the human resources work in renaming the department People and Culture. It's in respect of precisely what you have asked. That at the heart of our endeavor as the TDSB are the people that do the work, the people that make a difference, the people that have an impact on our students and our families, and that includes our PCCEWs. That also includes every other role. It includes our itinerant music instructors. It includes the instructors that teach our kids to swim. It includes our teachers. It includes our CYWs. It includes our EAs and our SNAs. It includes our superintendents and includes folks in every single role. And I appreciate you asking the question because it provides an opportunity again to reiterate the risk of emotion such as this in a budget context, because it could inadvertently convey that a position is more important than another, which I know is not the intention. I think that trustees may wish to consider other ways of indicating their value for this. Should there be another scenario, for example, where it's decided that the same employee group might perform another role that is deemed programmatically to have greater impact or to do it differently, would that be conveying that that is not of value to trustees or that is not of value to schools and school communities? So I think that that's one of the risks of a motion such as this, is what it means for other processes. But to come back to your question about people, at the heart of all of our work as TDSB are our people. And when we need to enact processes, because we must, that have an impact, it is not done with a cold heart. And so one of the things that we have done, for example, and perhaps not in every instance, although Executive Officer Ellis can certainly speak to this, is when we have needed to deliver notices, we've tried to take a people-centered approach. There have been a couple of instances where timelines got in the way of certain things happening. But to provide an example, when notices were going to be issued to a particular role, we held meetings with the, certainly having conversations with the union representatives. And let me just say, because I don't want to convey in any way that the unions would be supportive of notices and supportive of their members losing jobs. That would absolutely not be the case. So I want to make that very clear. However, as part of the process, we engage with union representatives for various roles. And we engage, we have met directly with, and again, not necessarily in every instance, so I want to convey that, but we've met with certain employee groups. For example, when notices were being issued with respect to pools, met with the workers, the employees directly, and provided information to the extent that we could. We met with principals that have involvement in certain roles to talk about and help them prepare for the conversations that we anticipate they would need to have. So we've really tried to take a people-centered approach to the extent that we could, recognizing that there may have been gaps in our process. But at the heart of our endeavor are the people that provide the services to our students, our schools, and our communities, and we will continue to value that. Unfortunately, these processes put us in very difficult positions where hard decisions need to be made, but that is in fact why process matters so very much, because when things get emotional, and they absolutely do for us as well, process really helps us to meet the obligations that we must meet, and we endeavor to do that in the most people-centered way that we can. Executive Officer Ellis, do you have anything to add?
I'm ahead of you. Good idea.
Thank you. And through the chair, I would reiterate everything that the Director of Education has expressed. People are our business, and we try to do everything we can to avoid and delay taking these measures. Sometimes we are unsuccessful, sometimes we are successful. We do try to talk with our groups, with our unions, and work with everybody to lessen the impact as much as possible, because we do recognize that this has an impact, and we want to try to avoid and or lessen it as much as we possibly can.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Since at this moment in time, we're speaking directly about the parent and caregiver community engagement workers, how are they communicated with beyond just receiving the letters?
Through you, Chair, I don't have that specific information, as I think I indicated that there were a number of employee groups that were or have been impacted, and I can speak to how what the process was for this particular employee group. But as I indicated, we've attempted to the extent that we can within the parameters that we have to operate within to take a people-centered approach, and where there's learning going forward, because we may be placed in this position again, then we will certainly lean on that learning in the moves that we take forward.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Trustee Rajwani. Trustee Earhart.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to note that I read the delegations that were sent to us in a package, and just to say that they were very heartfelt, and I hope that our TDSB workers who are here know how appreciated they are by the community. It was very apparent in the letters that we were provided, and thanks to everyone who wrote letters here, and also for the other roles that we're receiving letters for. I mean, I hope everyone that's working at the TDSB knows that they are valued. And I only wanted to note that, to me, this entire discussion really speaks to how our schools are at the heart of our community and supports for our community writ large. They are not just places where there is one teacher with one K-12 classroom. That is not the model for schools that, to me, in my view, spells success. Success for the achievement, for student achievement and well-being, is achieved when schools serve more than just having one teacher in a classroom. We need a community of supports. This has been echoed in Auditor General reports. This has been echoed in many, many, many other reports that are coming around the needs for broader community support, special needs assistant, early childhood educators, many, many, many of the roles that have received notices, mental health workers, Auditor General report on mental health recently. And so just putting it into context, that the connections that you are providing, the supports that are needed, that schools really are great places for that to happen for the government as a whole. And I'm happy that trustees are considering that in light, in particular, of the minister's comments in recent weeks. And thanks very much.
Thank you, Trustee Earhart. Trustee King.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you to everyone for what's been offered so far tonight. I don't have a vote on this committee. I am adding my voice to affirm the work of the Advisory Council, the delegates that spoke and wrote in, and to affirm the value of the PCCW role as well. I'm coming from a different perspective, where I no longer have model schools in my ward. I had 3 up until recent years, but 3 of them no longer have that status, yet they remain areas of high socioeconomic need. They are high needs areas identified by the city. They are LNSP areas identified by our own permit office. I'm talking about communities where the median income is less than 40,000, and I see the struggles through the community that are all the things that this role really responds to specifically. To the points of Trustee Earhart, there are many roles, of course, that together are the fabric of the care that our schools need. But I've seen very specifically the strain that it puts on the leadership not having this resource anymore. I've seen that the time that they input into having to deal with food insecurities being experienced by the students. I've seen them hands-on having to deal with things that are above and beyond and in addition to the leadership responsibilities that have to do with learning and facilities and all the things that we know need area as well, need attention as well. So I just wanted to draw some light to, the effect on the entire kind of ecosystem of the school, and just really appreciate the work of the advisory councils that are challenging us to really stand by our principles when we talk about that principle and that foundation of equity and what that means, and to draw us into a place where we're talking about things like addressing things from a poverty reduction lens, because that's the time and place that we're in and what our families and our students are living with. And it's the way that we need to be thinking and approaching. So again, I don't have a vote tonight, but absolutely support the intent here and again, the work of the committee. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee King. Trustee Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you, staff, and thank you to a few of my colleagues who spoke very diligently on this particular subject. And I do have questions to the staff. That 119 surplus notices went out, and this is not just from this department, it went from various departments. Can I know which are the other departments who got surplus notices?
So through the chair, I just want to confirm it's not 119 people, it's 119 different job classifications. And I will provide the list as soon as possible to all trustees. If not through Trustee Weekly, we can look at even sending it via email earlier if that's necessary.
Thank you, Associate Director. And through you, Mr. Chair, these surplus notices are due to budget pressures, or it's because of the upcoming negotiations on the contracts of the frontline workers?
So through the chair, I'll start, and then if somebody from People and Culture wants to jump in, please do so. We have positions that surplus notifications go out to every year based on their terms in their collective agreement. And so that happens. And then we have another group. So there's two different times where the surplus actually there's probably three if we want to be fair. We had the positions that we brought forward to trustees as potential reductions where decisions haven't been made yet, but we had to provide the surplus notifications in order to preserve that right. And then the third group of staff are staff that their collective agreement timeline was passing in order to be able to provide surplus notifications in order to preserve the right of trustees to make the decision. So there's really three different groups that would have received surplus notifications this year. One of them would have received them last year and the year before, and the year before it's part of collective agreement. And so it's really the second two that I think trustees are asking about. And again, we will provide that information. And once decisions are made, then if they are not part of the recommendations and not part of what's approved, then the surplus notifications would be rescinded. And again, I'm not minimalizing the impact that it has on the person that receives them, just strictly speaking about process.
Thank you, Associate Director. And to you, Mr. Chair, I did hear something else. I mean, I'm not sure if I heard correctly. Surplus does not mean loss of a job. It's moving to a different role. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair. Surplus does not mean that. It means that we are either we're either at a point in the collective agreement timelines where that's necessary, either to keep the option open for trustees or because that's part of the annual process. But it does not mean that someone is losing a job. I think what you're asking about, Trustee Patel, and I think I forgot to say through you, Chair. So let me just acknowledge that. Trustee Patel is if someone is in fact declared surplus prior to them actually losing a job with the board, if that were to happen, because in most cases it does not actually lead to that, then there are the series of steps that that people in culture and management will work through with that employee, supported by the appropriate union. With the appropriate union to consider, for example, movement to another location, or to consider movement to another role for which the person is qualified. And sometimes there may be a layoff at an extreme step, but even before the person loses a job after they're laid off, they're offered the opportunity to come back at the first available opportunity and so forth. So depending on what the role is and depending on the process that is outlined in a particular collective agreement, that would dictate what actually happens after a person receives a surplus notice. In the majority of cases, then someone who receives a surplus notice will actually remain in their position and in their location. However, these other things could happen. So it really does depend on the job category. It depends on the process that's outlined and collectively negotiated with unions for what should happen in each instance. And so process guides us in these situations, Trustee Patel.
Thank you, Director, and to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the clarification. And if staff does not mind to tell the trustees and to the general public and to the concerned employees, what is the process if they are about to lose a job or a layoff?
Through you, Chair, I'm going to ask System Officer Michelle Lawrence to speak to this, and Executive Officer Mark Ellis may wish to add. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And through the chair, when notification of surplus goes out, the employee receives a document. It's an extensive document, and the document is sent out well in advance of the date that it needs to be returned. And staff offer in-person drop-in sessions so that they can work with staff to understand and to complete the surplus notices. So what is contained in a notice is the first page will be around the staff's personal information, whether or not an accommodation is required, and the mode of transportation that is used. Then we provide information about the staffing process because it is based on the collective agreements, and with QP, bumping can happen between some job categories. So this is explained in detail. It is also explained to the staff member whether they are considered site surplus, which is surplus to their school building, which may be due to lower enrollment or a position relocation, or if they are potentially board surplus. And this is done well in advance, so there are no surprises come June 30th. So all of this information is explained and provided. Terms are defined. Then the next step is Part A, which are the transfer steps. And there's a difference between how half-time surplus staff indicate their preferences, then full-time staff. So I'm going to stay on full-time staff because I know that we're talking about employees that have been with us for a very significant amount of time. So step number 1 is that they can, if they are bumped out of their position, or if their position no longer exists, they can be placed into a vacancy that has the same classification and status. Step 2 is that they can look for the same job classification and status within their same region, because some people will have a preference or a need to stay within a certain area. They can also look to go outside of their region. Then there is the ability to change job categories to move to a lower job category. And these different scenarios go on, and employees are able to indicate where their preferences are. The final step is that an employee can indicate whether they want to proceed to the surplus bumping procedure, where they would then be able to bump a more junior employee out of a position, or whether they wish to be laid off. And many employees do pick the I wish to be laid off option, because then they have right of recall in the fall when we have opportunities for work because of leaves of absences for whatever reason. So some people do prefer that option. So there's a whole series of steps that they would go through. All of the sites are listed for them in terms of administrative sites that they may wish to be working at, depending on what their roles and positions are. So the next step after all of that is done is employees provide a skills inventory. And this supports the board in looking to place this employee into another position that may be different than something that they had looked at, because we have over 119 different job categories. So it gives us in people and culture an opportunity to look at what other roles they may be ready to take on. And we also ask them to detail for us other skills and training that the employee has that may not be utilized in their present role, but could be utilized in another role. We put a lot of time into the recruitment of our staff. So it is really important to us that we're able to keep our staff working with the board in whatever capacity they would wish to work in if their role does become either redundant or they are surplus to their role. So though that's an overview of the steps that are taken. So staff call us. So I have met myself with several of the our workers, our PCCEWs, to go through the steps of the form, and they're also invited to come and meet in person. They're also able to work with and talk with their supervisors. But again, it's not just this employee group. It is 119 different employee groups that we work with. So please let me know if that provides clarity in terms of the steps that are taken, or if more information is required through the chair.
Thank you, Michelle. That was very in-depth, information. And to you, Mr. Chair, when can I expect information on my motion presented on May 21st? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we are going to get to the budget later on. Well,
all right. Because
hopefully we're going to get to the budget later on, and all the motions that pertain to reports that were requested, and so it's on the agenda. We'll say, and we're optimistically hoping to get there.
Thank you, Chair. And then I'll make a brief comment and then I will stop and pause there. To the staff, I mean, we always rely on your best advice. And sometimes we are caught in operational matters versus an actual cuts, which we vote on. And I want to be very crystal clear on this. Anything which has to do with balancing budget on special education and on the CEW workers, I will not be supporting, because these are the most needed services in our communities. These are the most growing concerns in the communities. We have not even recovered from the COVID-19, and there are vulnerable sectors in the communities. Those kids need help. I'm concerned about this recommendation from staff. So I'm being very crystal clear on this. I will not be supporting any budget where these two sectors will be impacted, because this is the most needed at the present situation in the communities. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Patel. And just to be clear, this isn't a recommendation from staff. This isn't one of the options. This just simply exists as a byproduct of our budget process. And with that, I'm going to pass the chair to Trustee Hassan.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. When I was first elected, we used to get the core funding announcements in March and April. That's when we used to get them, because then you knew what the target was. And then you had an opportunity to try to do the budget before you would get to these lines where you would have to send out all these notices to staff. In fact, trustees, a few years ago, we tried to see if we couldn't get the budget done in advance of create a budget around what we felt we needed, and then we would work backwards when we got the core funding announcement. But the challenge is the timing of all these things makes it really hard to do any of these things. And annually, we send out thousands of letters to staff that we value, and we have no intention of doing without. That we really value their work, and that, but it's the nature of the business, the process that we're in. So the timing is in effect, and we have tried different things to avoid this. I would encourage our negotiating and steering committee, when contracts are due up, that we float in those conversations around moving the dates later in the year, so that they give us a greater chance to get this work done before having to send out those notices, because people have mortgages and commitments, and getting these letters is really problematic. I'm going to pivot, though, because we've been in the same place for a long period of time. I am going to pivot a little bit. I was a little concerned with what Mr. Khan observed and shared in his delegation around the concept that he was able to identify in the core funding announcement funding that is designated to support model schools and the economically less challenged. And there's a sense that we're not spending that money in that manner. So I would like to try to better understand from staff how that portion of the budget, whether it's sweatered, and if it's not sweatered, how we actually traditionally, in a general sense, how we spend it.
Thank you, and through the chair. So Mr. Khan was referring to the demographic needs component of the Learning Resource Fund, which is part of Core Ed. And just, I'm going to read from the technical papers. It says that this is a component that provides funding based on social and economic indicators that are associated with students facing barriers to success. So as you can hear, it is very broad. Our funding for 25-26 is estimated at $152.1 million. Just to let you know, that's $300,000 less than last year. The reason that it's less than last year is because the impact of the census that is impacting TDSB, and we are getting reduced funding because of the move to the 2021 census, has caused a $4 million decrease in this funding. And then the $4 million up is because there's a staffing component to this funding, and so the increases in the salaries are included there. So all things being equal, this fund has actually decreased year over year as a result of the census impact. We do have specific expenses that we would say would be part of this. And again, going back to funding based on social and economic indicators that are associated with students facing barriers to success. So much of our equity related work is funded through here, not just, I would say, the economic impact, but things like model schools. That model schools funding is there, our equity department is there, the Center of Excellence is there, we pass LOI teachers, that's there. We do things like, again, we don't go through our funding and say this, or our expenses and say this is coming from this dollar, this is coming from this dollar. Because if we did that, where would we say, for example, that the money that we're spending on the $38 million more on special education is coming from, right? What line item are we taking that from? And so something like special education would be partially funded through this demographic needs component. And I would say, I think I heard in the delegation that it was specifically for model school students, and that's not the case at all. Again, we don't allocate expenses to funding unless it is enveloped, and in this case, it is not. But the last time that we looked at when it was the log grant, all of the expenses that could be associated with the log grant compared to the actual funding, we were significantly higher than the funding that was received. And so, again, we wouldn't be able to, as staff, go through and say, this is for this dollar, this is for this dollar. But what I will tell you is anything that sits under that very broad, based on social and economic indicators that are associated with students facing barriers to success, we spend a lot more than $150 million to support our students in this way. And so, we can provide more detail with regards to those specific initiatives and how much they are costing. But again, we spend more on outdoor education. And part of when we had the motion back in, I think it's 2001, it was indicated that there are a lot of students in Toronto who don't have an opportunity to access outdoor education or to go on those types of overnight trips unless we provide it. So to me, that meets this definition, and that would be include the overage that we spend on outdoor education would come out of this funding, or could come out of this funding. So I want to be very clear. We spend much more than $150 million on supporting students with social and economic indicators associated with students facing barriers to success. That is the specific wording, and that is how we use that funding. And I really want to make sure that trustees don't believe that we aren't spending all of the funding that we receive to support students as best as we can using that particular funding.
Thank you, Associate Director Zucker. That concludes my question, so I'll take the chair back, sir. Thank you. Any other trustees? I know we're going to go make sure the first round, before we go to round two, we're going to make sure that anybody who hasn't spoken. Oh, did you not? Oh, I apologize. Well, I thought you had, so I apologize for that. Trustee DeVitis will go initially before we start round two.
Thank you. So I may be the last person, and a lot of things have been said, and people are looking a little tired and hungry, so I'll try and make it quick. I want to thank our folks formerly known as CSWs for the amazing work that they do. And share a quick story. Gosford Public Schools, just walking distance to Jane and Finch, just 2-3 blocks. And when I first was elected, I went to parent council meeting. There weren't a lot of people there. You can count them with one hand. And there've been some turnover in terms of the admin and even the CSW position at the time and so on. And over next year, some of that changed, and we had a significant improvement in that engagement. And a lot of it happened because of CSW. And I walk into a gym, one of the first events in the neighborhood after COVID, where parents and students were in the same room. And I walked into a gym, and there were 200-300 people in that gym. And the vibes were awesome. And that is a healthy community now, with a great administrator, great support team, and that's what you want to see. And I would like to continue to see more of that, so I'm going to be supporting the request from the committee on that. I did have a couple of questions before I go. So we have now received the main piece of information in terms of what we're allotted for our grants, for our funds, right? So why can't we, for those folks that don't routinely get their surplus notices, why can't we sort of then move forward on sending them notices that they'll be back in September, and we're happy to have them?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'll harken back to an earlier response where I indicated that the driver or a driver for surplus notices was around keeping options open. Trustees don't pass the budget until the board meeting, well, FBEC and then the board meeting on June 18th. Depending on the indications of trustees through the next couple of meetings, including tonight, hopefully we'll get there, then staff can begin making some operational decisions as we get indications of where things may land. But I just want to go back to the driver being both collective agreement timelines, including annual processes, as well as keeping options open.
Okay, but have we actually received the source of funding that pays for a lot of these positions at this point?
Through you, Chair, and Associate Director Zucker may wish to add that things that she explained a moment ago, that spending isn't necessarily aligned to funding in the same way. And so I think it would be challenging to answer that question from that perspective, Trustee Ditavitas. So it's really about the total budget picture.
So we're not able to confirm the source of funding for the position?
Sorry, through the chair, I think what again, the funding for the differentiated support amount is 152.1 million. If I were to add up all of the things that could be used to fund, it would be more than 152.1 million. So unless the funding is enveloped, I would say that a specific source of funding has not technically been identified, or if there is, where it would be funded from, it may have other areas that could also use that funding.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm having a difficult time with that concept, in that we're not able to allocate the source to the actual expenditure. And I appreciate the difficulty as explained by staff through chair. But at the last finance meeting, part of the explanation was given that we hadn't yet received the funding allocation from the ministry. So they're obviously connected. Like, we're going to spend 100% of the money that we receive, right?
Yeah, through the chair, 100%. And I think in receiving the funding, what we found was that there were no, magic grants that made us automatically balance. So although we are have improved slightly by $3 million, we're still looking for $34 million when it comes down to it. And so in order to find that $34 million, the things that everything that was put out as an option is no longer available in order to get to balanced. And you know, trustees may have different opinions on whether or not we should be getting to balance. But if staff is proposing to get to balanced, then we need to have every option available to us. And yeah, I would just say again, that because there is no specifically identified funding source, and that it can come out of this, I guess we are overspending on statutory benefits by $43.7 million. So we're balanced. So that means that it's coming from somewhere. So where am I taking that from? Am I taking it from special education? Am I taking it from, you know, differentiated support? Am I taking it from the teacher line? In general, because it's not enveloped, we don't actually dollar for dollar say it's coming from here, 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 right? So that I think is the issue, is that because the grants provide flexibility in how we use the funding, although I would say that we're pretty much in line with how it's provided, we don't do that dollar for dollar allocation because we can't. Like I say, I don't take this unfunded statutory benefits and say it's funded from here. I don't take the overages in special education and say it's funded from here, or pools, or, you know, IMIs.
Thank you, through the chair. So we can identify, for example, as a parallel, because it has a more dedicated source, I think, the amount of funding that is made available to us to spend on special education, but then also compared to what we actually spend. I think long-term, there would be a benefit for us to be able to do exactly what staff was commenting on very recently, that, you know, we actually spend more than what's been allocated on some of the initiatives around helping our students have equitable access to education in our system. And I think a report from staff on that breakdown, however they're comfortable doing it, would be beneficial, because we're also underfunded in this particular scenario, right? And if we can identify, it's much easier for us then to utilize the really positive energy from some of our parent communities for them to be able to advocate on our behalf as a school board, for us to be able to do more. So I think we would benefit from having some type of report that would speak to what the funding sources are, what we're doing with it, because we are doing great work. We've had, you know, a couple dozen people sign up and say that. So just maybe if I can have a comment from the director about the possibility of having some type of report, obviously not for this budget cycle, but in the near future, so that we can begin to better understand collectively the good work that we're doing.
Through you, Chair, based on the explanation that Associate Zucker just provided, I'm not sure the extent to which that's possible, but we can certainly take that away and consider it, Trustee DeVitas, just to see what may be possible. Just thinking about the way that the various funding lines work, the complexity of the budget process, the significant overage, for example, using special education as an example. It may be a tricky endeavor, and I don't know that I can make a firm commitment to bring a report back that would provide you the kind of clarity that I believe that you're seeking. So we can take that away and consider it, but I'd hesitate to make a commitment that we may not be able to satisfactorily meet.
Thank you, Chair. My time's up, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee DeVitas. Do I have any other trustees before we go to round two? Hearing and seeing none. Trustee Shen.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask a couple of more questions around PCCEWs. How many PCCEWs got the surplus letter, and how many PCCEWs do we have?
Through the chair, there are 24 PCCEWs, and all 24 would have received notice.
Okay. So, and they were receiving surplus notice as a potential option to keep on the table for future if needed, right? Through you, Mr. Chair.
And sorry, I apologize because they're on two different lines for some reason. There are 28. Thank you. And they all received surplus notifications.
Your second question was whether it was well, I'll let you, Trustee Shen, we'll start the clock, and can you re-ask your last question?
Sure. And these surplus notices were given as a measure to have options available to balance the budget.
Through you, Chair, that is correct, Trustee Shen. And just adding the additional context that was stated earlier, that this was one of many employee groups that received those notices. And if I may, just use the opportunity, Trustee Shen, to harken back to something that Trustee DeVitas asked before you continue. That would be one of the challenges, I think, of isolating a particular role. I think that staff really need to consider the implications for all the categories that received surplus notices with the same within the same parameters.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, that's my next question. So which other category got the entire staff of that category a surplus notice within the 193 that we talked about as an option to balance that was not discussed at the board earlier?
Through the chair, I'm not sure. We can provide that also when we provide all of the data, but I mean, we know that outdoor education would have been, all of those staff would have received aquatic instructors, but those are again the different categories. So I'm not sure, but we will take that back and provide it as well.
So we are not sure that one particular job title is fully being given surplus in the 193
through the
that we
chair.
listed.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the list and I don't know how many of them we have, so I can't tell you in my quick look, but maybe sorry, System Officer Lawrence may be able to provide more information.
Thank you for the question. Yes, there are other job classifications where the entire group were provided with surplus notices.
Who are those classifications? Is it possible to know who are those? Because this is basically removing an entire role within the system with a surplus notice if that option goes on. So who are those? Who's like? The reason I ask that is it shouldn't be for us to be thinking about depending on who showed up in delegation tables as opposed to who didn't. So I would like to know which job categories are fully being, which job title is fully being sent surplus notices within those that we didn't get to discuss in the board.
Thank you for the question through the chair. So high level, there are EAIs. There are many, because we have some that are unique allocations where there may be only one. So we can provide that to you because I know that you will be receiving a list of all of the different positions that receive surplus notices. So we will indicate which is the entire group, but confirming that there are many categories where the entire group received surplus notification.
So there are a number of positions, job titles, where the entire group received surplus notices, but we are not able to kind of, even from our our bird's eye view, not able to name even 2 or 3 more?
I could name 2 or 3 more. I don't know if that would be very helpful though, because there are many. And so we can provide those to you detailed.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah.
With all due respect, do you have the information? If you have the information, the question's reasonable. Like, I'm not understanding. It's not the systems officer's responsibility to determine what trustees deem relevant. If you have the information and it's being requested and you have it, we'd like it. If we don't have it, and we're going to gather it and give it to us at a later date, that's different. Then we'll wait and we'll take it when it's ready. But the notion about what's relevant or not, like, if we like what you have.
Okay, so through the chair, thank you for that clarification. I did not want to provide information that would be in a fragmented way. I wanted to be able to provide you with all of the information. So the ones that I can name for you right now will be accounts payable administrator, administrator trust and donations, analyst account reconciliation, arts events assistant, benefit pension assistant, braille transcriber, budget, oh, no, not that one, business services help desk specialist, call center agent part-time, customer service marketing representative, deaf-blind intervener, a designated ECE, FDK, and EDP, just reviewing the list, Eco School Certification Specialist. Do you want me to continue?
No, this is helpful. Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Are these single positions? Are there a number of positions? I'm just trying to figure out. I guess it'll be helpful for us to know. It's just some of these things as they are being mentioned, Mr. Chair, are of concern to me. That some of them might be the only person that is doing eco certification, and then are we removing them, or like it is. It is significantly, I know it's operational, but I do want to get a sense of what is behind some of these decisions, and the fact that 28 staff members in one category entirely got surplus notice. It was not a decision to reduce the staffing or potentially doing the thing. It was kind of potential elimination of the entire program when it's sent. I know it doesn't mean that, but it signals that there is a possibility of fully doing away with something. So this is very helpful to go through the list, because that also signals that some of those roles are being fully done away with if the staff are presenting these positions as positions that have been surplused. If we move forward with, for example, Eco School Certification Officer, if it's the entire group, then either someone else takes it on, or that particular role is going to be not available for us to do. So looking forward to having more on those. Thank you.
If I
Okay,
may.
thank you, Trustee Shen. And with that, we'll open the vote. We on East Grove?
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
Trustee
Stand
Hassan.
in favor.
Shannon in favor, Hassan's in favor. Trustee Wong, can you share how you vote? And Trustee Patel.
Patel in favor, Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Patel. Trustee Wong?
Chair, Wong is voting in favor.
Thank you, Trustee Wong.
Thank you.
And that carries. And that concludes this item. We are going to, we're going to break for dinner now. And then when we return from recess, we are going to go into private. So if you're a member of the public and watching, I'm not sure that I'd be queuing up the computer for at least an hour, but I'm guessing at this point, but we are going to break for dinner for 25 minutes. And then we are going to go into private and deal with 3 private matters. And then the public, that we will continue with the public agenda. So I apologize to the public that we can't be more specific. But so for trustees and staff, we were going to go on, we will recess until 5 after 9, and we will reconvene in private. Where's that?
5 after
I'm looking.
8. 5 after 8.
Sorry, I've got 7:45. So we'll go till 10 after 8 for recess. So 8:10, we'll reconvene for private. Sorry about that. At my age, those hands on the wall look closer than they did when I went to elementary school. And we're out.